So, hello. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as the traditional owners of the land I'm meeting on today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. Welcome to the first contributed panel of the symposium, Lessons Learned from Virtual Interactions. I am Rika Kobayashi and I will be chairing this panel. We have had some amazing contributions sent in and I'm pleased we can showcase them in this panel format. This session is from what we have called the Zone 1 Talks, and we have with us today Nicki Bowman, Claire Harris, Rachel Kelly, and Jens Klump. They are here to share their insight and answer your questions, so please keep your questions coming in the session Q&A box. So I'll now get the panel to very briefly introduce themselves and tell us the one most valuable lesson they have learned from interacting virtually. Going around in alphabetical order, Nicki, welcome.
Thanks, Rika. Great to be here. I think the biggest thing I've learned is the extent to which we have allowed physical proximity to substitute for really intentional actions around leadership and culture. The fact that we all used to hang around in the same place made us quite complacent about the fact that we knew what was going on, about the fact that people understood what we were trying to achieve, what the culture was meant to be. Now that we've been removed from that, I think that a lot of us are realizing that, wow, actually nobody did know that stuff. And so we're now thinking about how hard we have to work at building that culture and building that communication simply because we're physically removed, and we're realizing that we weren't doing it before either.
And Nicki, did you want to just tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My background is I run a leadership consultancy, and my passion is really around how do leaders create the conditions for people to do their best work. I've worked as a leader for over 20 years in a myriad of industries, and that's always been what's founded my leadership roles, and that's now what founds the basis of my leadership practice.
Thank you. So Claire, you're next. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Claire Harris, and I run Innovate Communicate, which is a consultancy. I work completely online, but I'm currently based in Canberra. And I'm really passionate about helping scientists and technically minded people to tap into what's important to them and to communicate and connect with the people out there that matter. My presentation that I submitted was a collaboration with Renee Arringer, who's also here in the chat function, so she'll be available to chat to people. And we ran an event for National Science Week called Canberra Women of Science and Art, which was very much targeted at specific audiences, children, families and teens, and particularly disadvantaged youth as well. And similar to what Nicki has said, I guess calling out that real understanding of the people that are around you. One key thing that we learned through running that event was the importance of really connecting with the audience to understand them, what they need, what time they're available, their tech accessibility. So really just understanding who the interaction is for. And we actually designed, so we came up with an idea, we pitched for some seed funding from National Science Week, and then we actually evolved the event as we talked to people and spoke to partners and worked with the speakers as well. So we're really adaptive in the way that we did that.
Okay, thank you. And alphabetical order, Rachel, hello, welcome. Tell us about yourself and the most important lesson that you've learned from virtual interactions.
Hi Rika, thanks for the intro, it's great to be here. My name is Rachel Kelly, I'm a UX UI designer at Symbio. We are a boutique software engineering company based in South Melbourne, and we do a lot of work with government, in particular the Department of Transport Victoria. And in terms of my biggest learning, it would have to be, so I guess my talk is on learnings from co-design. We've been participating in a lot of remote-based co-design sessions, and look, my main takeaway is that while we are having to adapt and move, you know, a lot of our research practices online, my realization was that we still do have a choice when selecting the appropriate activities to run in these sessions. So we've recently moved to using more of a hybrid approach to sketching and co-design sessions. So where we ask the participants to actually sketch offline using pen and paper, and actually then transferring that image into an online sharing platform. There's a realization that people are more familiar with, pen and paper as those traditional tools, but it's also noting that, we're still able to, work in those areas that are, more familiar and more comfortable to participants, but then, translate that into the online forum in order to have that collaborative discussion. So yeah, I think realizing that we still do have some choice when it comes to deciding, is it all digital, or can we use a bit of a hybrid approach? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Jens, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Jens Klump. I'm with CSIRO in the Mineral Resources Business Unit, where I lead the Geoscience Analytics team. And what really attracted me about this conference was to learn about virtual meetings, because I'm also the incoming division president of the Earth and Space Science Informatics division in the European Geosciences Union. And I'm the representative for Earth and Space Science Informatics on the planning committee for the American Geophysical Union fall meeting. Both conferences are massively large with 20,000 participants. And what we've learned from running the European Geosciences Union meeting in May online at very short notice was, and now in the planning for the upcoming American Geophysical Union meeting in December, is that switching to the online format really changes the dynamics of how to run large conferences. Because now suddenly the number of rooms and the size of rooms is not a limiting factor anymore. So the number of sessions that can run concurrently is different, but then time zones become much more of an issue because you're not in the same time zone anymore. And also in the sessions, the dynamics change, because now you have much more Q&A, we have time for one short question at the end, where especially the early career researchers don't dare raise their hand because they're afraid to expose themselves with maybe a question that they think is not a good question. The dynamics are really changed, but not everything is positive, and we'll, I guess, discuss this in this session.
So I was going to ask a different question from the one I was prepared, but actually what you have mentioned reminds me of the inclusivity question that I was going to bring up at some point, but I think I'll take this opportunity to just go around you all again. And starting with Nicki, you mentioned boundaries and awareness a lot, and I think all of you have sort of talked about connections and making connections. How do you think is the best way of stopping people from dropping off the radar, especially in this difficult remote sort of like environmental world we live in now? So Nicki?
Yeah, it's interesting because the virtual environment sometimes emboldens some people who might find a crowded physical environment more intimidating. And yet there are others whose voices just won't be heard. I've found that as a leader and as a facilitator, and I've facilitated quite a number of sessions, trying to develop tools to continually just check in on your audience, for example. And it's the same if you're a leader and you're running meetings, significant meetings, and you're seeking input. You need to develop almost eyes in the back of your head in terms of being able to assess who's been contributing, who might be just a little bit quiet, who's possibly just completely checked out. You do need to establish some good protocols around video usage. Who's on video, when can you be off video? When you're on video, what are the rules around, we were talking about it earlier, the muting, the not muting. Even if that means you have to start keeping a physical list of people and almost just putting a tick when they've had something to say, so you can double back and make sure that you're capturing those people who might be less inclined to put their hands up or who just aren't as quick off the mark, because we all know that there's this slight delay. So you're often accidentally talking on top of people who you think are finished. And so developing some skills and even finding those little techniques as a leader to make sure you haven't dropped anyone off the edge is really critical.
Okay, so Claire, so you have been, oh, thank you, Nicki. So Claire, you have been involved in a whole bunch of collaborative things like National Science Week and sort of like getting people together. How have you sort of overcome the challenge of sort of connecting to all these people or getting all these people to connect to each other?
Oh, well, our event was a public event, and I mean, I think it's a key theme through this this symposium will be the breaking down of geographical boundaries as being a positive and a great opportunity with moving online, so people can tune in from all over the place. They're not limited by having to travel to a physical space. But yeah, there is a real risk of making assumptions that everyone can dial in just like you can. And I mean, just recently, our particular event, we still, even though it's Canberra focused, we know that there were people that don't have a reliable internet. They don't necessarily have computer tech at home, or they don't have the timetable, the availability, because they've got caring responsibilities. And so working with partners was a really key approach for us, particularly tapping into the disadvantaged youth audience. And we created a physical activity and resources kit that we could print out and make available. And we also made them available through the ACT libraries. So working with Vinnie's and, we had some other partners around the place. So YWCA, for example. So other partners that are really connected into those audiences and those groups of people that, we couldn't get around. We had to do that. That was an imperative thing. If we had tried to do it without working with partners, it wouldn't have worked.
So interestingly enough, Renee on the chat has actually come in with something that actually backs up what Jens has said. So Renee says, Claire and I received feedback from a teenager involved in our event, stating how they felt more comfortable interacting in the virtual environment due to anonymity. So Jens, when we get round to you in a couple of people's time, I'd like to hear your sort of experiences about these emboldened ECRs, I guess. But I think next on the list is Rachel. What's your view on maintaining connections? You're doing software workshops, which is sort of like by definition being remote a lot. Have you seen a big change? And are connections different?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll start by saying it's so nice to be in this conversation and hearing similarities of experiences coming through. We are a small firm and I'm a UXer of one. So just to hear, I guess, that shared experience is really great. It's really gives me a lot of confidence. Yes, I think we really, we were in the throes of a really big research project during as we moved to remote delivery. So my firm's been working remote since March, and as part of that process, we really had to reconfigure, the research methodologies, move everything online. And I guess to Nicki's point, it's really difficult to, bring in everyone's voice, and to ensure that you're hearing from the person in the back of the room that, maybe has nodded along to everything, but hasn't, you've not heard their voice yet. And we have adjusted our co-design sessions to be much smaller. I think, in terms of co-design workshops, it's really important to get the size right. We've found our sweet spot at the moment is around 4 to 5, but I also think it's just important to be aware of the duration of your workshop, because there is a real need to allow for just additional time online for whatever reason. the flow can be a little jarring. You know, you spend the first few minutes being like, can you hear me? You know, is everyone, you know, and so I think it's really important to come with quite a flexible and open attitude, especially when leading and facilitating these sessions, because there will be unexpected glitches that arise. And, you know, it's just really important that you make time for that, because it's just inevitable in the virtual setting. We also did a lot of, we did a separate project we're doing research with people with disability, those that travel on the Melbourne transport network. And while they weren't co-design sessions, they were one-on-one listening sessions. You know, we actually found the participants we spoke to as part of that had a relatively high level of digital maturity, you know, with regards to, you know, having platforms and tools set up, predominantly desktop, to access, you know, and sort of be able to facilitate those sessions. So, yeah, I think with a workshop setting, just be aware of numbers and allowing for a bit of a buffer of time within the sessions, because, yeah, it's inevitably different to an offline setting.
Okay, Rachel, I might come back to you because there's a question. Oh, sorry, my senses are ridiculous. My lights have just gone off if you're wondering what's happened. So I'll come back to you because I think there's a question here that I think you're the best equipped to answer, but there have been a lot more questions that have come through. So I think I'd like to move on to Jens to get onto that topic of how do you maintain collaborations, but especially because the questions come in where it says, Jens, and Vanessa has asked this, I can't even imagine a conference of 20,000 people. How does that even work? Do you think that size conference will continue in the future? And I think considering we're talking about connections and maintaining them and making sure no one drops off the radar, please let us know about your views on that.
Yeah, that is a very good question, because people who haven't been to these conferences really wonder, how does this work? And what happens is that in the physical setting, you actually stay in your little disciplinary bubble for most of the time. And then it's maybe 40, maybe 100 people that you actually interact with. And so even though the numbers sound gigantic, it's actually like many parallel conferences happening at the same time that just happen to be something about geo and space. But what this constellation of many different disciplinary conferences allows you is to skip across borders, and that is very interesting. So what I used to do was if there was a gap in my schedule, to walk through the poster hall into sessions that I had an interest in, but no professional connection, like planetary science, to find out what is Mars research doing nowadays. And so this is an aspect that I wonder how we get that transferred into the virtual world. How do we create the serendipity that you bump into somebody in a coffee queue or in a poster session and have a conversation, and that then sparks something new?
But you said even in this context, the ECRs are finding their voice. How did that happen?
So, yeah, of course, convening a session in that setting is something that you need to train, and people are still learning. And so, in the physical setting, the best situation is that early career researchers have a mentor. So these conferences have mentorship programs to help people connect, and it's often they travel with their thesis supervisor who makes connections, etc. So, but I think this becomes even more difficult in a virtual setting, because at the moment, at least, a lot of that interaction is kind of formalized into sessions. There's no coffee queue where you bump into somebody, or even if you have virtual poster sessions with the Q&A or some kind of interaction, how do you then switch onto talking about something different, like, oh, we went to the same university, what's it like? Or like, you know, these kind of conversations that you have at a conference. So then, even though there's a lot of technical things we still develop and learn about improving online conferences, I feel that the biggest gap is in enabling this social component.
Okay, so that's a good opportunity to go back to Nicki, because a couple of questions have come in from something you've said, Nicki.
Okay.
So Nicki, there's been a question that's really, well, I'll read it out. So Ollie has asked, hi Nicki, you mentioned being mindful of people's wavering engagement, but what do you do to bring people back to the conversation?
So you sometimes have to upend the conversation to do that. So if you're running a live event and you're watching people's energy levels, what you have to do is you actually have to sort of interrupt. It's almost like an attention interruption device to get their attention back. So that's where you see in conferences and in presentations that people will stop and then they'll say, okay, we're going to do a bit of a warm-up exercise. Everyone stand up, shake your shoulders. And so you've got to think about bringing that into the virtual context. So you can start to tell when people are wavering, because what you're watching is you're seeing more people go onto mute. You're seeing more people's eyes wandering off. Sometimes people will even get up and walk away from their computers, depending on what's going on in the background. So those are the times where you sort of have to take stock of the energy levels. Then you just stop whatever you're doing, and you have in your back pocket a series of little exercises to do. So one might be physical. It might be, look, we've always been sitting too long. Everyone just stand up. And yes, I know I'm going to be looking at your belly buttons, but it's fine. Just stand up and wave your arms around, and something as simple as that physical interaction. If you're concerned that there's a couple of people particularly that seem to be dropping off the edge, then you can come up with some almost virtual exercises that are fun icebreakers. So not an icebreaker directed at the topic of conversation, but just, okay, we're going to quickly go around the table, all 10 of you, and you're all going to tell me what's the worst thing you've ever eaten. And so what you're doing then is you're forcing everyone to pay attention. You're disrupting the slide of energy that's just occurred, and you're re-engaging people and refreshing the situation before you move on.
So this is interesting. So the question that thank you very much, Nicki. So moving on, because there's lots of questions coming in. So I hope you do later sort of go back to the Q&A panel and answer them. Yes. We had a question that I thought was mainly for Rachel, but it looks like Claire might have answered it as well. But I'll start off with you, Rachel, about what are the best tools for running hackathons? And I don't think this is really a scientific tool sort of talk. So if you could keep that very, very brief, because we're soon running out of time and there's a couple more questions I'd like to ask.
Oh, that's a great question.
Do you have hackathons?
The last hackathon I was involved in was offline. But look, I think a good hackathon, it's about a really well-structured day. I think it's nice to have opportunities, give options for the people involved to participate in. So the last one I was involved in, there were sort of 3 streams. One was hacking a website solution. The other was creating a digital kiosk to let us know when what the weather was like, before we left the building. So there were sort of 3 different areas, in terms of taking that online. The digital tool I recommend using in the talk I've given is Mural, mural.co. It's really lightweight. It has a great UI and UX. It was also very easy for participants to log into. So it doesn't require any downloading or, signing in. So you can simply create a template in Mural, add it to your calendar agenda, and send it out with the invite link. So I do a lot of my, when I'm sketching and for co-design workshops, that'll be the preferred platform that I use. But it's got some great preset templates. I would highly recommend
It's actually
that
very
tool.
similar to the Fujitsu ideation workshop one. Have you signed up for that? Because I think
Oh, I haven't, but okay,
I
thanks
think
for
you
that.
should,
Yeah, I
because
definitely
I
would.
noticed that you were using very similar tools, but conscious of time, I think Claire, you're the Claire that replied in the question and answers.
Yes, but I haven't.
Because, yeah, I did not expect you to be a computer person, but yes, quickly, very quickly, sorry, a minute or so. Can you just tell me what you want to say
Sure.
about hackathons?
I lurk too much in innovation communities, so I just see and meet really interesting people. So that was why I just flagged checking out Open Hack 2020, where they do global. The founder of that organisation is actually based in Australia. She does global hackathons, so she'd be a good one to check out. But
Okay,
yeah,
so
I can't comment on the tools so much, but yeah.
I actually signed a hackathon for my second year Python programming sort of course, and that was all remote, and that was all live, so I have no idea how you can sort of get people together. So thank you, Rachel, for your advice on that. The best I could think of was breakout rooms. So I'd be surprised, Nikki, if you've got anything to say about hackathons.
I really don't, Rika.
Okay, yes. Did you have any hackathons as part of your conference?
Not yet code sprints and other projects, yes. But because of the time zone challenges, we just had short stand-up meetings and then did a lot of things asynchronously. But I also worked with Miro in a different context and quite like that.
Oh, can you quickly tell us what you used Miro for?
That was for a Cyro workshop for one of the Future Science platforms and designing the research program for that. And that was very well prepared by the organizers, who then took us through 4 panels in the course of a 2-hour session to co-design the research program.
Okay, so yes, because the next session is going to start fairly promptly, there are a whole bunch of questions coming into the session Q&A, so I will ask you panelists to please go there after this finishes. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that you can all answer quickly. Okay, no, this is a good one. So all of you in half a minute, sorry, after this life-changing experience of COVID, what do you think the future of meetings, education, etc. will be once we go back to a more normal environment? Sorry, guys, half a minute. Nikki?
I think the face-to-face interactions will be designed to facilitate much more of what Jens talked about. That is that intercollaboration, the accidental drop-in, the coffee queue, delivering what online can't. I think there'll be a lot more focus on that. Okay. Why do you need to turn up?
So Claire?
Completely agree with Nikki, but I think there will, there will also be hopefully that continual question of how can we be more inclusive, because shifting things online has shown that you can actually drop a lot of barriers and you can equalize access to things in some regards. So hopefully people continue that and they don't go back to the blinkered, here's the standard invitee list.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to echo what Claire said then. I think it's a really exciting time for accessibility and inclusivity. I think that moving to a virtual, virtual world is moving to a more open world, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that means for, be it future meetings, but also future employment. What does that look like, which is really exciting.
Jens?
Yeah.
And I think we can still learn by looking at other kinds of events. And like I suggested in my video, if we look at large sports events, not everybody's in the stadium. There are many ways to participate and be engaged. And if we look around, maybe we find some cues into what else we might consider.
Okay, I was just looking through the chats and the session Q&A, and there are a lot of questions there. There's no way we can answer it. It's just been awesome being able to talk to you and hearing from you. And I think you've all agreed that it was great to be able to share your insights between the various communities. So I'm really glad it's worked, because this is totally experimental for us. I will let you get on your way because I'm having to moderate the next session. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time. Keep engaging with the community through the various discussion posts, your booths, and see you around the social things, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Rita.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.